Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog, John Martin, as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog, John Martin, and Captain Ted Yoho.
Welcome to the 3Ps Political Pirate Podcast, featuring yours truly, the old salty dog, and John Martin, and the captain of our pirate ship, none other than Mr. Ted Yoho, and he is live from the Keys in Florida. Good morning, Ted.
I'm from the fabulous Florida Keys. Good morning to you, John.
Well, I tell you, Ted, it's as we always say, after we do a show twice a week now, and maybe we'll need to go every day here in the near future, but there's never a lack of anything to talk about. And now I tell you the story that's getting some publicity, but it really concerns me because of the ramifications of it all. But right. And we're going to use an LA Times article to talk about this. But Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has said that Israel plans to take over all of Gaza in a bid to destroy Hamas. So they're ready to take over the final push. And before you get started, Ted, I want to tell you, I got a friend of mine, we've talked about him before, that is super connected to Israel. He's an Israeli citizen, but American now, served in the military and everything else. And he even said that he didn't realize till this weekend that they had not gone into Gaza City principally. They'd kind of avoided that area.
Right.
In all these years, they really haven't. And now they're about to, and that's pretty interesting. What are your initial thoughts on this, Ted?
You know, I heard a comment the other day, and I thought it was very good. To leave the Gaza or the Hamas in Gaza would be like leaving the Nazis in Germany post World War II. And I don't know how you solve an issue like that, as heated as it is, as treacherous, and just where they're killing people just out of spite because of religious beliefs. How you leave that alone? And if I were in Netanyahu's shoes, I may do the same thing. I don't know. I mean, it's a terrible situation. But I think the important thing here, John, is look at how blessed we are in this country. We don't have to do that in this country because we have a constitutional republic. And there's always this talk about the democracy is under threat. Well, I felt that way when Obama and Biden were in there. And thank God Harris didn't get in there, because this country would have been over as we know it. And so over there in Hamas or in Israel and Palestine, they've got to work that out amongst themselves, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. However, I would point out, and you already know this, that in our own streets right now, at our universities, of course, President Trump's trying to battle that. We literally have from the river to the sea, that type of stuff, which means eliminate not only, as you bring up all the time, the infantada global. We got a guy running for mayor we'll talk about again in a little bit for New York that says globalize the infantada. And like you've pointed out accurately so, that doesn't mean just death to Israel. It certainly means that, but it means death to all non-believers.
All non-believers.
So we have a growing contingent, and it's becoming interwoven in the fabric of the Democratic Party that believes in apparently what Mamdani is preaching in New York.
It really does. And this is why it's so important for people to read. And I'm going to start a book list you and I talked about. And I think one of the first ones, if people want to really know the mindset of culture, like the Muslim culture wanting to take over, it's Samuel Huntington's book, Clash of Civilizations. That book was written in the 90s. What we're seeing right now in the United States and Europe and the European Union, Germany, all these countries around the world, the Netherlands, you're seeing exactly what he described in that book. And you're seeing the rise of the Muslims because they start off at the small local level. Mamdani was a city council member, if I remember. Now he's running for the mayor of one of the strongest cities in America. It's known worldwide. And how can that happen? And that book describes that. And so there is a change going on. There's always going to be change. But the thing that we can't get away from are those basic principles that made America what it is. And those are the founding principles and our core values.
Well, you mentioned that about Islamic. I saw a meme on Facebook. And by the way, we now have a Facebook page called Political Pirate Podcast. We're just really cranking it up. So people need to go there, like it, share it far and wide. But there was a meme going around, and it's really true. It says essentially that Islamic, and they're mainly talking about fundamentalists, but they really believe in individual rights and everything else when they're in the minority. They clamor about their rights, and they use especially Western civilization's rights. Like, they clamor about it all the time until they get into the majority. Then they don't believe in that anymore at all. And
no, they believe they have rights, but you don't.
Right, but they don't believe in the end. Right, they don't believe in freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. No, they don't. They don't believe in other religious faiths. And when they're in the minority, they do. But when they're in the majority, that's what people need. Muslim by any stretch. But I'm pro-American. I'm pro-freedom, and I think people should have the Bill of Rights, all American citizens, and not based on religion. My fear is if they ever actually gain real power in the United States of America, they will try to destroy that.
Well, keep in mind, the Democrat Socialist Party of America, that is the one that brought in AOC, that's brought in a lot of the squad members, that brought in Madami, the leader of that, last name is Kagan, how he said that all communists are socialists until they achieve socialism, then they move to communism. This is exactly what's going on. People don't realize it, but it's going on right now. And that's why, I feel it's so important what we do is educating people. This is happening in New York. It's happening in major urban areas around the United States. And it's time for people to wake up. And we're going to talk more about the fight, as you talked about with Governor Hochul, and what's really going on. And it's insidious. It's everywhere. And it's just kind of smoldering. And like you said, they believe in individual rights until they get the power. Then it's their rights, not yours.
Yeah, well, back to this article. If you're just joining us, first of all, welcome. But we're talking about the news coming out of Israel from Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, that Israel is about to actually totally occupy Gaza and stay occupying it. And they say that they want to destroy Hamas, and they intend to take full control and to eventually transfer it to friendly Arab forces, whatever that actually means. I'm not sure. I guess those are in the details. But here's the thing, Ted. It says here in this article, LA Times article, expanding military operations in Gaza would put, this is their words, not mine, would put the lives of countless Palestinians and the roughly 20 remaining Israeli hostages at risk, further isolating Israel internationally. And it says Israel already controls around 3/4 of the devastated territory. But the question I have really, Ted, and I'd like to get your opinion on, really, what choice, when you think about it, and you referred to the Nazis earlier about in Germany, what choice does Israel really have, realistically? What choice do they have?
John, I mean, your life and my life, we've dealt with Israel in the Middle East. I mean, there's been so many conflicts over there. And what choice do they have? They've tried the two-state solution. They've offered that to the Palestinians, I want to say over 7 or 8 times, if not more. Every time the Palestinian Authority or the ruling party, Hamas, which is really not a party, they're a terrorist organization, they've rejected that. They've rejected the idea that Israel as a state has the right to exist. They reject that. It goes back to what you're saying, from the river to the sea, that is popular speak in the pro-Palestinian movements now. And so what choice do you have? If I have somebody that's threatening me, and you think about Iran's death to America, death to Israel, North Korea, death to America, death to, anybody that's around them. At some point, when you take them serious, and I think October 7th, 2 years ago, Netanyahu and the Israelis took it serious, and no more. But then on the other side of that, you got to think, well, if they're going to destroy Hamas, is that genocide, or is that a surgeon taking out a tumor that you've got to get rid of the whole tumor? If not, it's going to come back. And so those are the questions people got to weigh in and weigh out on. We don't want to see anybody exterminated. But again, we don't want somebody next door to us that's threatening to kill me and my family. That's just not acceptable. So if they can't come to a peace deal, you think of World War II. The reason that came to an end, especially with Japan, is we bombed the living stink out of them, and they begged for us to stop. And that may be what's going to happen in this next thing. And then they're going to say, you know what, no more of this. And then the Palestinian people will hold their own people in check. So they're like, we don't want any more of this. And that, I think that's where we're heading to.
Well, you mentioned we're going to talk directly. I'm going to show you some video in a little bit about World War II and all. But something, and people need to take this, I hope, the way I mean it. From Israel's perspective, now, do they trust America? Have we been great friends to Israel? Most presidents, certainly the one now, Benjamin Netanyahu said, is the best they've ever had, that kind of thing. But you can understand why the Israelis have to be prepared to go alone, even if they're not alone. Because going back to the Holocaust, and I'm not saying the American people knew, but there's plenty of evidence that our military leaders, including the presidents at that time, knew about the concentration camps. And they purposely kind of avoided them. And the theory behind it is that they wanted to take out the Nazis first. They wanted to focus all their efforts on crushing Germany and not trying to liberate the concentration camps, because that would give the Nazis time to keep their war effort going. I can respect that, but from the Israeli standpoint, you look at that and say, well, you knew about it and you didn't do anything for a couple of years. How many Jewish people died in those concentration camps during that time? I mean, it's a tricky thing, but it's reality, and they have to look at that.
They really do. Yeah. And, this is the sadness of history, I guess, not history, but looking back over humanity. It's why do we have to have these conflicts? Why is there that kind of lack of resolve to solve these problems without the death and destruction, the inhumane treatment of people? Instead of focusing on the future of where we go, think of how much better off humanity would be if we put that money into research and development, in exploration and cures for new cures for diseases that are ongoing. How much better off would we be if we could get out of that that race of I'm stronger than you and all that? But I think that's just human nature, and we're going to have to live with it. Maybe AI will be the solution.
Well, I want to play this video now, and this I want to give people a little heads up on it. Some of these next couple of videos we're going to play are a little graphic, but this is Hamas. This is not too long ago when they released the first, I guess, few hostages they released, and they basically paraded them in the streets and they celebrated it. And I want you to see, because the point I want to make is this is who you'd have to negotiate with. Check it out.
Well, before we go there, hold on, Zach.
I think he's already playing it.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Ted. Go ahead.
All right. I want you to look at the destruction in Gaza. Look at those buildings. This is what these people have been living in, and they haven't bothered to fix their own situation.
Well, Netanyahu actually said in an interview on Fox News yesterday or day before that a lot of the buildings that you see destroyed were destroyed from within, were sabotaged to destroy them as they were coming in. They weren't bombed. They bombed plenty of it, but a lot of what you see was not actually bombed by Israel. This video, if we get to play it, let me go ahead and set it up in case we get it ready. That this is from Austria, and this is when they liberated one of the concentration camps. Let me know when we're ready, if we get it ready. But I'll go ahead and make another point I was going to make, Ted. When I just recently, basically a year ago, went on a Mediterranean cruise, and we were all in the Western Mediterranean, and we went all the way from Morocco up into Spain and everywhere, and Portugal, and everywhere we went. Of course, the Nazi footprint was there, that's for sure. But what was really fascinating to me is every place, some of them going back 1,000, 2,000 years, are places where Jews used to be. Used to be. They're no longer there. Now, they may have moved back, some of them, but they were pushed out of all these countries. So when you put all that together, you can see why the Jewish people say never again. They're never going to let that go again because they can't trust the world to protect them. If history repeats itself, they're gone.
No, you're absolutely right on that. And, when they run this video, I want to remind people, General Eisenhower at the time, when he went through these camps and he saw the emaciation of these people and the starvation, he said, never again can this happen. This is how short-sighted people are on history, because it happens over and over and over again. It's going on right now, as you pointed out about the Jewish hostage in Palestine digging his own grave. But this is going on in all these refugee camps around the world. There's refugee camps that have been up and running for over 30, 40 years around the world, mainly in the Middle East and Africa. And it's just a way of life for these people. But there's famine, starvation, corruption, death, rape. I mean, all that stuff goes along with this. And I've got to think that we as people, as humanity, we can do a lot better job than this.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that about the refugee camps. One thing's for sure, that the Arab world has been unkind to the Palestinians. If you want to put them, the people that's been the most unkind to them is not the Jewish nation. It's actually the Arab nations who have done nothing. Only resources they give them is to prop up groups like Hamas, and before that, it was the PLO.
No, that's a good point.
They haven't actually done anything to help the Palestinian people.
They really haven't. We heard that, when Bibi Netanyahu went in there and started to do the shooting, they said, well, something had to happen with the Palestinian refugees. Well, the Arab world said, oh, yeah, we're kindred spirits. We've got to do something. But on the side, they're like, we don't want them in our country. So like you said, they're not welcomed in their own community. And it's because of what you see there, walking around with the one guy looked like he had a portable AR or 50 cal, walking around with it. And we see this all the time, John. You and I have both been on the other show with Chris Evans, and he talks a lot about these conflicts going on daily around the world. And what we have in America is unique.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page, or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Or that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
Well, welcome back to the 3Ps Political Pirate Podcast with the old salty dog, John Martin, and the captain of our ship, Ted Yoho. We had a couple of technical difficulties. I apologize for that, but I think we're back on track. But I will point out, Ted, I will point this out, that having technical difficulties shows that we're real. You know, we're not these polished major news stories that just put out all kind of nonsense. We give the old, what I call unvarnished truth. We wipe all that old stuff away. We're hardwood truth here, Ted. But welcome back. We're back.
Could be Russia or China doing that. Never know.
Yeah, they may be trying. That might be a sign that they're trying to come after us. I get a lot of trolls on like Facebook. So keep on trolling people, because that means we're doing something right. You know what I mean? If you're trying to squelch us. But Ted, let's move on to this story, because I know you'll get a kick out of this. That this is from the AP. Texas Democrats, and we're talking about members of the Texas legislature, pled for donations. They're pleading to donate to them because they extended their walkout and blocked Trump's, quote, redistricting plan, because they're staying mostly in Illinois, some of them in New York. And guess what? It's kind of expensive in Chicago and New York. So they're trying to ask for money so they can stay in hiding. It's unreal.
I think it's interesting that they flew to a sanctuary city. Where else can they be protected? You know, along with the people that are here illegally. This is typical of what the Democrats do. They do the walkout, and then they plead to people like, oh, we can't do our job because of those evil Republicans. They did this on the House floor when John Lewis was alive, and AOC's person, Joe Crowley, he was there. They were eating Kentucky Fried Chicken on the House floor, doing a sit-in, raising money in the House. And why Paul Ryan didn't, go after these people, but he tried to play nice with them. You just need to hammer these people. And what they're doing, Governor Abbott going after these people, putting out arrest warrants, working with the FBI, is exactly what they need to do. They do this over and over again. You look at the state house in Wisconsin that got taken over by the left-wing radicals when Governor Walker was there. They've done this in other states. This is what they do. They get angry because they're not getting their way, and they have these walkouts or sit-ins and protests. When do you ever see Republicans doing that, or people that believe in this country and the rule of law? We don't do those things. I mean, we may protest, but we get active at the polls and we win elections. And this is not what they're doing. They're acting like a bunch of kids that don't deserve to be there, obviously, because they're not solving problems.
Yeah, well, you mentioned about the walkouts, and Republicans don't do that. And I'll give you a couple examples. One, in California, they got overwhelmed with redistricting and they didn't walk out. In New York, they stood and fought and actually won in court, even though they were in the minority at the state house. And in Florida, Ted, a lot of people don't realize this. Florida is now red, but most of my life, Florida was blue, deep blue, especially at the legislative and governorship and all that. And people say, oh, well, the Republicans gerrymandered Florida now. But here's the point. They didn't quit ever. And Florida turned red under the districts that the Democrats had drawn up. People forget that. The districts, when Florida went red and took over the House and Senate and the cabinet, it was blue districts that they won, because guess what? People had gotten so fed up with the Democrats in Florida that they tossed them out and went across party lines and voted for the Republicans. Now, did the Republicans come back and take advantage of that? Absolutely. But the point is, they stood there for years, not days or weeks, but years, and kept fighting. And now Florida's red, and I hope it stays that way.
Well, that's the way people used to say in Florida. I remember when I moved up here from South Florida, people said, if you want to be able to vote in the primaries, you got to be a Democrat, because they did control everything. But, again, that kind of goes back to the motto of our show: educate, motivate, and activate.
Yeah, but it says here, look back to this article, and this is from the AP. We're talking about the Democratic legislature members fled from Texas. And oh, by the way, I think the Speaker of the House, if that's what they call him in Texas, is actually a Democrat. It was just kind of odd, but
really
because there's some bipartisan stuff, some rhino stuff there, in my opinion. But I don't want to get sidetracked. But they're urging other people to fight against this. And listen to this, because you mentioned about they went to a sanctuary. This is Illinois. I'm just going to use Illinois as an example, Ted. The Dems are in. Trump got over 45% of the vote in Illinois in the 2025 election. Over 45%. Now, there are 17 House seats in the state of Illinois. 17. So I don't know, simple math, 45. We'll just say, okay, they should have at least, 6 to 8 seats?
Yeah, you would think
how
so.
Many, if you think about the voting, how many they actually have? They have three. There's 3 Republican congressional, basically, districts in Illinois, and there's one. You want to talk about gerrymandering? If you look at this map that I couldn't get a good copy of it, but there's a district in Illinois that is the most gerrymandered district I've ever seen. It's like pencil thin, and it covers about half the southern part of the state just to get one Democrat.
That was like
what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Corinne Brown's seat. It went from the state line and snaked all the way through down to Orlando. And it was some places only a street wide. You talk about gerrymandering, and that was done under the Democrats. So this is a political BS that they're throwing out there. It's, oh, we're going to fight this. And I know you're going to go into that video of Yoho. I want to warn people ahead of time that.
Well, you mentioned that Congresswoman, and God Almighty, I was in her district for a long time.
Yeah,
when I was a city commissioner and mayor in my city. Now, I was a Democrat at the time, and the whole commission was Democrat, was majority black. Do you know that never one time, Ted, in the 13 years that I was on the city commission, 5 of which is mayor, did she ever come to Hawthorne? We would ask her to, invite her to. She never came to Hawthorne at all, not one single time. And the reason is simple. She just took us for granted because we were just a small sliver that was carved out, like you say, in Alachua County. And that's what she did. And
see, that's what happens. When people get elected, they think they own that seat. And they think, how dare you question my judgment? And this is what's going on with AOC. She hasn't been to her district. You know, people are upset, but, you know, there's enough uninformed people that they're going to reelect her because they're the D, like Nancy Pelosi said. You put a glass of water up there half empty, and if it has a D, they're going to vote for it. I mean, this is how you lose a country like ours, by being uneducated about the process and what people are doing in Congress.
Well, we talked about it on our Monday show, that AOC and what Ted's referring to as her district, and go look back at our show or look it up yourself online. But the Roosevelt Boulevard, they call it the Sweethearts or whatever Avenue, I think now. Avenue of Sweethearts. And there's so much open air drug market and prostitution there that people are beginning to rise up. But Nancy Pelosi herself said that a glass of water could get elected in that district. So unless people begin to wake up, which is
if it had a D after it, yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we do our show is to educate, motivate, activate people. Unless people rise up, people like this are just going to keep getting elected over and over and over.
Yep. And then we wake up and say, what happened? You know, it's because we didn't get informed. This goes back to the founding fathers. You know, the only way you're going to keep a constitutional republic, and Ben Franklin said, it's a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. He knew it was going to be a struggle. And they said, you can only keep the form of government we have if people are virtuous, well-educated, and they're active in their community.
Well, that's why we tell people are getting more apt. They get where they don't. I hear people all the time, I'm sure you do too, say, I just don't want to be involved in politics.
Oh, I hear it all the time.
About politics. I've heard that a large part of my life. But that is the problem right there. We need to encourage people, and I think we do a good job on this, that we need, in these times of crisis, we need to be more active, more political than not. more than ever. We got to man, as I say, the political ramparts, or we're going to have to man the real ones again.
We really do. And I wish we could get people to be more engaged. And I know you run across this. And we travel around a lot, and I ask people, "Oh, where are you from?" And they tell me. I said, "Well, who's your congressman?" You know how many times, and these are well-to-do people, they'll say, "I'm not really sure who it is." I've got family members that don't know their congressmen or senators in their own state. And it's like, how can you keep a country going if you don't even know how it works and you're not holding people accountable? So there is a responsibility of us to stay engaged on this. And it's like absolutely. You said, you're like Big Sid, your dad said, you don't get the government you want, you get the one you deserve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to play you a video right now, because if you're wanting to know what the Democrats will do if they actually regain power, James Carville tells you what he thinks they should do, and it is pretty alarming. Check this out if we can get that up.
Appeared Wednesday on his Politics War Room podcast with the journalist Al Hunt. The two were discussing the current redistricting war between Republican and Democratic states when Carville suggested Democrats should take things a little further.
Let's listen.
If the Democrats win the presidency, the Senate, and the House in 2028, which is not impossible. I don't know if you say likely or possible. I don't know what word you know, but it's certainly not impossible. They are just going to have to unilaterally add Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia states.
Carville didn't stop there, however. He suggested Democrats follow through on an idea some of them have had for a while now, packing the Supreme Court. Let's take a look.
And they may have to expand the court to 13 members. Any of those things in isolation, I would be skeptical about. I would be cautious about. I would say, well, I don't know if that's the greatest idea in the world. You're opening Pandora's box, or all kinds of things. If you want to save democracy, I think you got to do all of those things, because we just are moving further and further away from being anything close to democracy.
In September of 2024, Oregon Senator Ron Wyden introduced.
Well, there you have. There's James Carville literally telling you what he thinks that the Democrats should do. God help us if they regain all the power in Washington. He says we got to make Puerto Rico a state, and we got to pack the courts. I mean, my God, man, save democracy, Ted.
Save democracy. God bless James Carville. He's like a herpes virus that never goes away. It's hard to expound on what he says, because everything he's talking about to make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state, you know what that is? That's 2 Democrat senators from each one of those states. You talk about gerrymandering. D.C. was set up in the original foundation that it's an administrative state. It will not have statehood. And I love what Trump's doing. He's talking about federalizing it and taking it over because Marion Bowser, the mayor up there, is doing such a terrible job. But then stacking the courts. I mean, this is something that was so contentious last time. I think it helped the Democrats lose, because they were talking about stacking the courts. Kamala Harris wanted to stack the whole courts. And you talk about a breakdown of democracy. You change the rules to favor you so that you can keep winning elections. This is what they're doing. And remember, during COVID, who was the party that wanted all the mandates? Who wanted those silly 6-foot distancing arrows on the ground? You had to wear a mask. You had to do all this nonsense. That's the Democrats, because they want to control people. And these are the people that are trying to get back in power by rigging the system. This really is rigging the system.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love how he says we got to do all of this. He doesn't say it's right. He never says this is the constitutional thing. He never refers to that. He says to save democracy.
Remember,
I mean, to me,
going back to that Ken Martin, no relative of yours, who's the chair of the DNC. Might not have been him, but it was a guy talking about strategies for the Democratic Party. They want to win. They don't care if it's right or not. They just want to win. And I think that's the problem here. They want to win regardless of how they do it, so that they can be in power. It's all about power and control. And it's a very dangerous thing, because you're not going to withhold or maintain a constitutional republic. It's very dangerous what these people are doing.
Well, I want to point out to people, the very people that are talking about the Democrats saved democracy. This is how they saved democracy during this last election. There was no primary. They pushed RFK out, wouldn't let him come on the ballot, all of that, right? Then when Joe Biden dropped out, they didn't have a primary. They didn't even let it go to a convention vote. They anointed Kamala Harris. Think about this, to be their representative, who has never won a national election. When she was running for president way back when, the first time, she never even made it to the Iowa caucuses and dropped out. So here's a person that they put at the top of the ticket who had never won a single election in the nation for presidency. Not one, not even come in distant third, let alone second.
Yeah, and she was the first one to drop out, like you pointed out. And, you know, I'm going to play devil advocate here. This is the problem with party politics. Because if you go back to when Ron Paul was running, and it was the first, I think it was in 2012, because that's when I won my primary. We were down in Tampa or Tallahassee. We were in Tampa. They had a vote to make sure he wasn't on the ballot. So parties do this. It's party politics. It's ugly, but it's not the will of the people. It's the will of the party. But the Democrats do it more blatantly and more often than the Republicans. This is where we've got to get people that are going to serve a nation, not a party. And the further we go down this road of party politics, the more divided we're going to become in this state, or in this state of the way things are right now. We are dividing more and more, it seems like.
Well, Ted, you'll probably get a kick out of this. So I used to be a Democrat, and the first vote I ever cast.
You sound like you're a confessional.
Yeah, I am to a certain extent, you know. But the first vote I ever cast for president in my lifetime as a registered Democrat, the first time, because I voted in every election I possibly could, was for Ronald Reagan. Okay. Now, fast forward to I became a Republican. Guess who the first Republican I voted for as a Republican was for president? Ron Paul.
Was it really?
Yes, I voted for Ron in the primary. So I voted as my first vote.
I think I did too. Yeah.
So my first vote as a Democrat was for Reagan, and my first vote as a Republican was for Ron Paul. So I guess that kind of tells you where I'm at.
Ron Paul, I got to meet him. He was leaving the year I came in. He gave me his book, and you know, he wasn't dynamic, but he was very common sense, and he was a good person that loved this country, the founding principles of it. And you know, it's too bad that the establishment, and there again, it's the establishment, it's the party of big government is controlling all this. And this is where somebody like Trump came in and just upset the apple cart, and it needs to be upset again and again and again until the people take over the country. You know, we the people.
Well, you mentioned the establishment, so let's be fair, and you kind of talked about it right then. The establishment tried their best to keep Ronald Reagan out of office. They fought Ronald Reagan all the way till he got the nomination. And then, of course, Donald Trump, my God, they didn't want him to be in there. But the people, that's the point. The people rose up and spoke, and we had Ronald Reagan, and now we got Donald Trump. That shows you the actual power that people have if they would just get educated, motivated, and activated.
You know, what's funny is the establishment tried to keep me out. When I went and met a political consultant, the first person I met with, Carolyn and I went to Tallahassee. He goes, let me tell you something right now. He goes, they don't want you in D.C. They don't want your type in D.C. They don't like your type. He goes, and this is why. He goes, the person that you're running against, who he beat, they know exactly how he's going to vote. They know how to control his voting. And somebody like you is a wild card, and you scare them. And I'm like, oh, is that right? So he didn't work for us. We didn't hire him. But he was absolutely right, though. He was absolutely right. And we've become friends since then. And he laughs about that. And he goes, well, I was completely wrong on that. So, hey.
Well, the bad news is Washington definitely misses Ted Yoho, in my opinion. But the good news is, because you're not in Congress, we can spread you all over the world and the nation right here
That's
on
right.
the Political Pirate Podcast. So it is to our
have your
benefit.
logo right on this hat right here.
Absolutely. Well, if I always tell you to take these Democrats at their word to a certain extent, at their word. I'm going to play a video right now. This is Governor Hochul. Of course, she's housing some of these refugee Democrats from Texas as well. But I want to play this because she tells you
another sanctuary state.
Right. She tells you exactly why she's doing what she's doing. Check it out.
In New York, we will not stand on the sidelines with the timid souls on the sidelines who don't care, will not invest their heart and soul into this battle. This is a war. We are at war. And that's why the gloves are off, and I say, bring it on.
Catherine. Ted, she literally looks right in the camera and tells you not that we're, battling to win. We're at war. She announces that what I guess she's talking about the Democratic Party, is at war. Are we at war, Ted?
I think we're right on the verge of it, John. And, you see the Democrats wanting to create all the commotion. I mean, go back to Maxine Waters. Go back to just the Democrats over the last 6 months to a year. Who's the ones out there saying all the F-bombs, doing all that stuff, and creating the violence? Look at Chuck Schumer going to Gorsuch's house. Neil Gorsuch, the Supreme Court justice, say you've got blood on your hands, and they doxed the Supreme Court justice. Give me a break. These are the people that are fomenting violence. Look at Antifa, Black Lives Matter. You can go on and on and on. You don't see the Tea Party. They never did that. We never did that in that organization. It was all about the country, and let's stand for the principles of this country. The Democrats are very dangerous. Well, they're not Democrats. These guys are Marxists and socialists. And again, going back to Ken Martin, the head of the DNC, he says, we're going to have a wide tent. We're going to have the moderates, the conservative Democrats, which is a joke. We're going to have this, we're going to have that. And we're going to have the socialists in there too. So they want a party of everybody that is anti-American so that they can win. And it's not on principles, it's about power. Vote these people out, people. Vote these people out.
You mentioned about the, we're kind of talking about, we're going to talk a little bit about Mandami right now, but I thought it's the same as like Slotkin or something. She's a senator from Michigan, a new senator from Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she campaigned as a moderate, basically, in Michigan.
She's not a moderate. I served with her.
Right. But she came out and endorsed Mandami just this week and said that he was the energy of the Democratic Party, and we need to get behind him. That's what she said.
Yeah, he's the energy. And if you look at his rallies, he's got a lot of enthused people there. Obama had a lot of enthused people. But look at what the transformation that happened when Obama got in there, because he was running on anti-American principles. And that is what Mandani is doing. I mean, there's enough out there to tell you how he's going to govern. And for Slotkin to come out and do that, now keep in mind, she's from Michigan. Michigan, Dearborn is a very strong Muslim group. And so she's catering to her base to keep her position, not to protect the country and the founding principles. And these are the dangerous politicians that are there to serve themselves. And politicians worry more about their next election versus statesmen that worry more about their next generations. And again, the American people need to wake up. The people in Michigan, throw this person out. She doesn't own that seat. You do.
Yeah, absolutely. And this didn't make a whole lot of news. But if you want to know what's going to happen when Mandami, if he gets to be mayor, and it looks like he may be, New York, without him being mayor, just decided to fund at the cost of $65 million a homeless shelter just for transgender people. Just for transgender people. That's the only ones allowed there. $65 million. I'm not anti-transgender, but I just don't know if that's necessary. But that's think about what you're going to get if he becomes mayor, if they're doing that without him being mayor.
New York will change. And you know what, John, this is, I guess I was thinking about this earlier. This really is what America is about. We're the experimental lab of governing, self-governing. And if this is what the people of New York City want, well, by God, get it, but you're going to have to live with the results, and don't look for a bailout from the rest of America.
Well, Madani has come out and said that he vows to be Trump's worst nightmare, and if the president gets involved in it in New York. So we'll have to see that. But here's the thing, and I want to warn people about this next picture. It's kind of graphic, but you want to talk about a nightmare. We got all this Cindy Sweeney stuff going. Check that out.
I got to put my blinders on.
I apologize for putting that image. Of course, it's Photoshop. We have to tell people that now. But there's a nightmare for you, man. Nancy Pelosi and her jeans. But we only got about 5 minutes left in the show, Ted, and I want to talk about a subject that you brought to my attention, because one of the things we like to do here is occasionally put stuff on your radar screen that the mainstream media may not be covering. And this is about what's happening in the world's oceans and even happening here in the United States. And it comes to you from the Daily Signal, and it's about the Chinese basically overfishing and factory fishing the world's oceans. Talk about this, Ted, and why you think it's so important.
Well, John, this is something I with my strong background in foreign affairs and foreign policy, this is something the American people need to be aware of. China, again, this is an example of their overreach and lack of following the world order or rule of law. They have, in this article that I sent you, they have over 57,000 fishing boats spread out around the world. And a lot of those are protected by either their Coast Guard, and their Coast Guard is militarized, or they have Navy ships that protect these fishing fleets. And they go into these areas around the Galapagos Islands, and they're just raping the oceans. They have no regard for the environment, and it just goes on and on again. And they overfish so much that the host country or the sovereign country that the Chinese are fishing in, they lose their fishing resources. And this is something that goes on and on. And this, again, when you buy made in China, this is what we're supporting.
Well, I want to give a quick example from this article, and then I want to come back and ask you, what do you think we should do? This is from this article. In late February of this year, Argentina detected 380 Chinese vessels looming in their exclusive economic zone, 200 of which they subsequently discovered had engaged in fishing within that zone. 380 vessels, probably more than the 200, but 200 that they proved were illegally fishing just in Argentina alone. What do you think we should do as a country and as, a leader in the world to prevent this, Ted?
I think, number one, they need to come out publicly and denounce us. And a lot of the countries, they sink these boats. I think that's what we do. We sink them. They sunk some in off the Gulf of America not too long ago. It was a Chinese fishing boat, and there were some Mexican fishing boats in our EEZ zone, and they got sunk. And this is what needs to happen. And then there needs to be the outcry from people around the world, like, stay in your own backyard. I don't want you in mine. And again, the biggest thing we can do is hit them economically and just come out and just say, we're not buying made in China. That's why I wrote that editorial. And, when people know the real cost of what made in China is, it's not the cheap product or thing like that. It's you're empowering the Chinese Communist Party, whose main goal is to take over the world and be under authoritarian control. And that's, John, that's not too far from what the Democrats want to do, authoritarian control. And I think the best example of that goes back and look at what happened under the Biden administration with COVID. And look at all the liberal news organizations yelling at people, if you didn't get the vaccine, you deserve to die, and wear a mask, and all that hate that went on, all the people that got driven out of business, all the people that the students that couldn't go to school for a year because of that authoritarian nonsense that didn't need to happen. And they're willing to do it again if they get back in power. I mean, Hochul or Carville wants to stack the court, and it's just they don't deserve to be in power.
Yeah, well, Ted, I think really the solution is that what we're trying to do on the show, we as an American people need to be the most populous on the planet, because that's the best way to basically save the world, the way I see it. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'm sorry, Ted, I had to cut you off. I'll give you the last word, but I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please like what we're doing, share it far and wide, and I'll give you the closing comment, Ted.
Well, again, I appreciate everybody listening and sponsoring, but it's our job to educate. And it starts with us and our children, our friends and family, and just build a network out there and let people understand what's at risk here. It's the American way of life, which I think is the greatest on the planet. And so we appreciate everybody being here. We appreciate you spending time with us, hearing our thoughts. We love to hear your comments, and have a great weekend.